I'm going to talk about this wall's got to fall. This wall got to fall. Somebody say, this wall got to fall. The more I look at this particular leader, the more I like some of the predecessors who were from his own political party better. I'm almost ready to apologize for all the stuff I said to Bush 1 and 2. So I'm going to dare quote from President Ronald Wilson Reagan for my introduction today. He served somewhere, I believe, between 1980 and 1988. He's not one I'm known to quote, but there are 2 quotes I attribute to him that I think are appropriate and that I use time to time. One of them is trust but verify. That means some people, even if you trust, you better check it out. Make sure it is what it is. But another one he gave, and I think he gave prematurely, at one time to be able to share, but he gave at the right time this particular quote. He gave one premature that I won't quote, but one he gave at the right time. And that is when he stood at a wall that had been erected for years, separating East and West Berlin. And he opened his mouth and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I think believers ought to unite of every kind, of every color, of every kindred, of every gender, of everything, and say, Mr. President, tear down this wall. I'm not necessarily just talking about a physical barrier wall that he wants to build on the southern border. That interestingly, that he's building a wall on the southern border in the name of stopping drugs when it's already known that most of them are coming through the ports, coming through the air, coming through cars, coming through the northern border. You got more drugs coming from Canada in than you got coming from Mexico in. You got more people. The only difference between the 2 borders is the color of the people crossing over them. And while we're building walls on one side, we still got a lady standing in the water saying, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We are hypocritical. We are schizophrenic. We are bipolar. We're giving one message to some people saying stop, and everybody else come on in. And we're using walls as a imagery when these founding documents and fathers helped to bring and send people with bridges to say, bring me those who ultimately, this land of the free, home of the brave. These yet to be United States has got to be clear about what e pluribus unum means. Out of many, we are one. And the walls that we ought to be concerned about is not just some $5.6 billion physical wall trying to be erected that ain't going to really do the job in the first place. And really, that's just a deposit on how much it would really cost if anybody crazy enough to try to do this in a technological age, because we're trying to use a 1920, 1950 mentality over in a 2020 situation. We're still trying to use lard when other people are using oil. We're giving a blockbuster fix to a Netflix generation. But the walls that we need to understand that are erected that need to come down are not the physical walls. As much as the fact that in the midst of all of the rhetoric, in the midst of all the challenges, we are building higher racial walls. The walls between the races, the walls between gender, the walls between military leaders, the walls between countries, the walls between Republican and Democrat, the walls between those things that we tried to bring down. We are building bigger barriers than bringing down the walls. People are turning against each other versus to each other because we are building up invisible walls. You got to be careful because you can tell when the walls are being built and when the air is being done, the ethos is such because people even start getting crazy and cynical. I mean, maybe you haven't noticed it, but people who was getting along in the last administration, you know, people who was at least singing Kumbaya, at least you got you a couple of people who didn't look like you, who were talking regular basis. All of a sudden, they put on a MAGA hat and you can't talk to nobody no more. People look down, people look around, people look over, people have this sense of manifest destiny. People have, I saw even a Native American beating a drum, and young high schoolers who were there began to surround him like they almost wanted to beat up on him. People walking around with this sense of entitlement. People talking about taking something back that they never built. On my way to Washington, D.C., for our midwinter board meeting, and when I go and I look at some of the monuments, some of the places, and people who are looking at the founding place where 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the biggest public housing we got in the country. But it was built by our ancestors. Come on, talk to me here. The blood of the people who were brought over some 400 years ago, looking like you and me, not only did it, but a man named Benjamin Banneker laid out the city. People still can't figure out how to get around town yet. But had a mind and a design in order to lay out a city. Wall Street was built by black folk. Even Black Wall Streets in Tulsa and other places that we erased, people were beginning to do and build and do great things before they could even, quote unquote, learn to read and write. They weren't ignorant, they were denied opportunity. Because they didn't build walls, they built relationships. They built bridges, they learned to talk with each other. When they were stripped away from mother and father, son and daughter, families were torn apart. They didn't build more walls, they built different relationships, big mama, big daddy relationship, village relationships. They built the kinds of things that would connect people, not divide people. If you look and listen to not only the rhetoric of them, but the rhetoric of even the messages of Dr. King, amidst of all the hatred, all the fire hoses, all the dogs, he never did allow himself to get down in the gutter of the people by which he was standing against. And he kept talking about the necessity for us to build a relationship of bridges into one another's lives. He saw the day where his children could go to Funtown along with others. He saw the day when red men, black men, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, others would be able to walk together and sing and say those words, free at last. He kept visioning in the midst of people who were trying to separate. He kept visioning ways we could come together. You got to be careful about what sets the climate, because you'll find yourself fussing and cussing and being mad at folk you don't even know what the problem is. If you're not careful, if you catch on the climate of the day, you'll start finding yourself being cynical and being angry and cussing at the news every day and going and looking at people with disdain and having a chip on your shoulder and rather to be by yourself and pulling aside and getting caught up in social media and doing things that would separate you from reality versus bringing you together to create a new reality. Don't get me wrong. Walls are important. Don't get me wrong. Walls are necessary in the appropriate place. Without walls, we'd be freezing to death right now. Because walls are protecting us from the elements of the outside. Come on, talk to me here. The sub-below zero weather and the snow and other things that are happening on the outside, we have the capacity to have this warm structure where we can contain and maintain our heat and be able to make sure that our DTE bill ain't going crazy. We ain't got to put no plastic on the windows or nothing of that nature because we got good walls and good windows. Come on, talk to me here. And structure is necessary. Without structure, people would feel violated if people could drive by down the street and see everything you're doing in your house. Thank God for walls. Without walls, you be seeing what's going on in another room that you ain't got no business knowing is going on in another room. Thank God for walls. Without walls, when you get angry, you wouldn't have no place to go to get away from people you wouldn't want to talk to no more. Because you just be in that one room, shot room house like you used to be when you thank God for walls. Walls represent structure. Structure is good. Everybody likes times of privacy at some point, even if you're in a hospital. You may not have no wall, but you want to pull a curtain. Come on, talk to me around when people come in at will just because they decide to stop by to see you. But sometimes you feel violated when you're trying to recuperate. And you have to put some kind of partition between you and others so you can get yourself together. Structure is important. I'm going to talk this week about the importance of having sound, solid constitution and bylaws because you need that structure in order for an organization to have strength and ability to go forward. You just don't need to be visiting it every week. Anybody who always checking out the bylaws, everybody who always quoting the Constitution, they ain't trying to bring nobody in. They trying to put somebody out. Y'all missing what I'm saying? So be careful how often you check on it. Just know it's good. You don't got to keep going downstairs when you come to church and check the basement to make sure it's a foundation. It's down there. Come on, talk to me. You don't have to come and look up under the pew to make sure there's screws and boards that hold. No, it'll hold you. Same one you've been sitting on for 50 years. We say we don't have trust in nothing, but we trust some stuff, and then other stuff we want to check on. Structure is an important facet of our life. Without structure, beautiful rivers become floods. Cooking fires become raging infernos. Without structure, organized institutions becomes carefree and chaotic. Without structure, peaceful meetings become ferocious free-for-alls. Without structure, marriages become a mess. Without structure, thriving businesses become tax burdens. Without structure, a growing, loving church can become a holy hellhole. You need structure. My argument is not that structure is not needed. Structure is needed in every essence of our life. Walls do represent structures that can protect, but walls also can represent structures that can restrict. Text says Jericho was shut up. None went out. None came in. Somebody say none went out. None came in. Jericho represents how it is in a whole lot of marriages today. A whole lot of churches, a whole lot of governments, a whole lot of places, a whole lot of people. People just want to make sure that they build things that will ultimately, on one hand, protect, but you got to be careful of when you even have a closed hand policy. Because whatever you got, if you're holding on to it, you say, ain't nothing coming out of this hand because I got it. But guess what? Ain't nothing coming in there either. It's best that you use open hand policies when you're trying to build and develop, because Jericho was a great city of its day. Jericho, I wish I had time to tell you about its importance. I wish I had time to tell you about how the text reveals to us in that topography. It's the same place in the New Testament that you will come to know and find out was the place where this winding, meandering road called the Road of Jericho. where this Samaritan was ravaged one day, and the priest and the Levite walked by. On my trips over to the Holy Land, I've always noted in Jericho, sitting there, about how it starts high and how it runs fast low. It's not a big place. It's only about 6 acres. It's not a large territory. Again, only about 6 acres. Can I give you some news? This ain't a real tall wall. I said it's really not a tall wall. This ain't no $5.6 billion wall built by the government. No, it's really a wall that at best is only about 4 stories high. But the way they built it, and because of the topography of the land, the closer you got to the wall, the taller it looked. Y'all gonna be slow with me, okay? You got cold again? See, I need to turn the heat up. I said the closer you got to it, the taller it appeared. Let me walk around it here a little bit, and maybe you'll be able to do it. Let me just say, first of all, y'all ready for points, so let me just help you get on where you're going. Number one, there's always a wall right before your blessing. I said there's always a wall right before your blessing. Have you ever figured out that right before you get to your promised land, there's a wall? I said, have you ever figured out, look back over your life and look at where you're going right now. You know, right before you get to your proverbial promised land, whatever that is you're after, whatever that is you're looking for, right before you get there, it seems like there's a wall. Look at the children of Israel. Here they are, 400 years in slavery. Moses led them out with a mighty hand, had a stick in his hand, a rod, 10 plagues with Pharaoh, able to move them, lead them out, opened up the highway in the midst of a Red Sea, took them across, and Pharaoh's army got drowned in the same water holy people tried to crossed over on, because God ain't gonna let your enemy and you cross on the same boulevard. They got on the other side, and then they complained about a glass of water, and God just brought them through more water than they could drink in a lifetime. But here they are, going through the processes of trying to make it through desert sands, but he fed them along the way. Y'all know the story. Brought down manna. Bread, just told them get enough for the day. Stop being a hoarder. Y'all, hoarder, y'all got that. Some of y'all start looking like hoarder. Stop being the other thing too, all right. Told them, I need you to take serious the fact that I'm going to provide for your daily needs. Maybe that's why Jesus gave us that, to give us this day. Too many people worried about next week, tomorrow, next month. Thank God that he gave you bread for today. Stop trying to figure out what God's going to do tomorrow. And just know that when you wake up, if he takes care of the sparrow, if he takes care of clothing the grass, if he took care of pushing up lilies and flowers, how come he ain't going to take care of his best creature? I don't worry about tomorrow. I just live from day to day. Many things about tomorrow I don't understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. If his eye is on the sparrow, don't make me go there yet. I'm going in a minute. I do know he watches. Can I get a witness here? Over me. I don't worry about some things I don't have control over. And he took care of them feeding, took care of their clothes. Same clothes they walked out of Egypt with, never wore out in the wilderness for 40 years. Ain't he all right? Became their own cleaners. Became their own shoes. I went to get my shoes shined, they told me that the place where I went, I ain't gonna call the name, great place though, but they decided to take a vacation for a month. I thought a day or two was fine, but they took I thought I was reading wrong. Had to get out the car, walk up in the snow. They left Christmas tomorrow. We be back February. I can wait a week. I can't wait a month. But I had to go back to shining my shoes like I had to do for my daddy. Come on, talk to me. Some things will take you back to, wait, thank God for parents that taught you how to do your own. I didn't cry. I didn't get upset. Come on here. I didn't just try to buff it against my arm. I had to get the old polish out, the old brush out. Come on, talk to me here. Because thank God for people who taught you how to survive. Their shoes never wore out on a hot desert sand. God took them all the way through the desert. Made it all the way through Pisgah. Took it all the way through the fact that they messed up even when it came to the Ten Commandments. You know the story of how Moses got them to the paradise and he didn't even get to cross over because he was fussing and fighting so much of stiff-necked people, he couldn't hear God say, speak to the rock when he was striking. That's why Joshua's come on the scene. God needs somebody who can hear him say, speak. Joshua 1 opens up and says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now rise, go over this Jordan. So Joshua's leading them and has taken them through everything. Had to go through, now watch this, they're going through one Red Sea, but he had another river to cross. He had the Jordan River they had to get over. He had to get through all of the challenges, and it looked like that they're all of 40 years of Moses, and then the river that they got through with Joshua, you would think that by now, having sent the spies over and come over, they ought to be able to walk on into Canaan. They've been through the dark night of the soul. They've been through Jim Crow. They've been through civil rights. They've been through the issues of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, if you will. They've gone through all of the challenges. You would think now, as we come now to 2019, we ought to be able to walk on in. We didn't have a black man in the White House for 8 years. We ought to be able to walk on in. Come on, talk to me here. We've seen some things our ancestors never seen. We ought to walk on in. We've had Joshua moments where we've seen the ability. We make more money in a day than some of our ancestors did all year. We ought to walk on in. Come on, talk to me. And just when we're ready to walk on in, here come this person. I forgot where I was. Building walls. Right before we realized the dream, we were wearing Obama shirts for 8 years. Now we got to put the King shirt back on. Because somebody done built a wall. Isn't that like life? Just when I've worked all this time, I'm about to get the promotion, and then they bring somebody else. I done gone through all the interviews. I done made it through to the last bit. It looked like I got everything done. My bio got everything set, and I'm ready to get hired. And then they say the job is no longer offered. I done dated this girl. I done bought her everything and got to her, bought a ring, everything else, and everything just went out there. Now she didn't see somebody else that's cuter and finer than me. I got to go down whatever street y'all on. I don't know where y'all at. I gave everything I had to this man. I helped him to go. He had nothing. I had the job. I made sure things were working. I took care of the babies. I cooked the food. I did everything, make it happen. And then he hit the lotto one time, and then he going to go walk off with a little 20-something. Somebody say this wall. I don't know why it is that right before you get to your Canaan, there's always a wall. When you get to the brink of blessing, when you get to the hallway of hope, when you get to the threshold of a breakthrough, when you get to the door of deliverance, when you get to the welcome mat of well. You know how when you see something, you get well. Right before you get it, to taste it, you're just there. They were right at Canaan. And they looked up, and now here's a wall. There's always something that blocks you. Don't get frustrated. Don't get upset. Because you think the devil going to retire just because you done made it to your 60s and 70s. You think you're going to stop being tempted because you're 80 and now listen, you're going to have the same kind of temptation. Just because you can't do what you used to do on the dance floor don't mean you can't do it at the casino. Come on. You used to wiggle like this. Now you just do it like this. Amen. Temptation going to come some kind of way. It used to be like this. Now it's like this. But you can't give up just because a wall shows up. Am I helping somebody? Let me hurry on. Number 2, walls represent hindrances that only come to test how bad you really want it. It's amazing to me how many people give up right at the end. It's amazing to me if people could look back on their life and see the moment that they got depressed, the moment they quit, the moment they walked away, the moment they said, I'm going to kill myself, if they could have just looked and seen how close they were. Good Lord from Zion. They could have just seen if I just held out another day, another moment. Come on, talk to me. Another hour. If I could have just hold on, tell your neighbor, grab him by the hand and say, hold on, don't quit. You don't know how close you are. But sometimes God allows walls to be built to see if it's just a slogan that you have, talking about we shall overcome, or you rather to fight to get to it. We want everybody to give us something. That's what's wrong with this generation now. We want Canaan to be coming in some kind of comfortable package. Give me my Canaan and let Federal Express drop it off at the door. My ancestors didn't have that attitude. They said, before I be a slave, I be buried. They said, I'd rather fight than switch. Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. They fought until they looked up and somebody said, you can stop fighting now, we in. Walls merely serve to deter you and distract you. I told you the city was only about 6 acres, and the wall wasn't as big as it seemed. Built to look bigger than it actually was. Closer you got, bigger it looked. Isn't that how it is when it comes to our blessings from God? And I promise, look like the closer you get to your blessing, the bigger your problems seem. Even Scripture says that whenever Jesus, watch this sometime even, was able to heal somebody from demonic possession, even after they were told to leave, sometimes the devils acted a fit before they left. You will see in one case it says they tore him and then they left. Just like some folk you know. The devil ain't never going to stop till he has to. Yeah, you got saved, but he ain't going to stop. Yeah, you come to church, but he ain't going to stop. Yeah, you pressed out in the snow to get to church, but he ain't going to stop. You ain't going to get no extra credit, and he going to leave you alone because you pushed out in the snow and made it through the cold of the day. No, if anything, you might get some extra challenge because of the fact he will say, how dare you miss your moment today? Because he wants to keep dishonoring God. Understand, people who reject church, people who rather watch me on Facebook Live than putting their live body in the building. People who'd rather be able to not gather together as the manner of some is. People who would rather denigrate institutional coming and the fact that God says there's more power in our unity than there is in our division. When people get to the place when they'd rather be in their own private quarters because they don't want nobody to tell them nothing or hold them accountable. When people get to this separate, then that's Satan trying to point his finger at God as the accuser and say, I'm still after trying to dishonor you. He will do it until the day of his return. But he ain't going to get me or use me to help him to get it done. Tell your neighbor, he ain't going to get no help from me. Too many of us call ourselves Christians, but we're helping the devil out of his agenda, with his agenda. When you quit, when you refuse to fight, when you refuse to stand, when you refuse to march, when you refuse to do whatever you are dealing with, you are participating in the problem. Whatever or however things appear to you. And most times, I'm not going to lie, situations do look kind of big. I mean, you know, I don't know how it is that we got from where we were 4 years ago to where we are today. And it looked like even when they use the I word, things don't look no better. And I ask myself some question when I wake up and see the state of where we are and all the stuff that's happening. We're willing to shut down governments because we want to have our way, and we're playing cops and robbers games, and we're playing Hatfield and McCoy games. And I wonder, how did we get here? And it looks sometimes impossible that we'll ever be able to come to some sensible, reasonable conclusion. And you wonder, you know, what about the possibilities that if people do what they did before and they now pass marijuana laws, so we might go chilling some more. And we might go, you know, getting higher than we was before. And we might fool around and miss another election and have to have 4 more years. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes that wall looks really big. When I look at how many people don't care what's going on. They're being hit, they're being hurt, but they'd rather go rob some old person than go march and say, open up my job. The wall looks big when I see us killing each other more than the Klan ever did. The wall looks big when I see people who are proud to say that they don't have faith in God anymore. The wall looks big when I see the number of our children who are committing suicide, not threatening, I said committing. Not saying I'm going to do it. Most of them, when people tell you too many times what they're going to do, chances are they ain't going to do much. But people who quiet and ain't said nothing, be careful. They're carrying out things that they never even dreamed about doing before. The wall looks big. But let me say to you, don't come to church magnifying your problems. I said, don't come to because they're big enough, but don't use the circumstances of your life and make them bigger than they already are. And the magnifying glass of fear is what makes things look bigger. When you approach things with a sense of fear, you make ordinary things look bigger than it is. That's what fear means. False evidence appearing really big. You got to stop looking at stuff bigger than it is. You don't magnify the problem, you magnify the Lord. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. Come on, talk to me. And let's exalt his name. When? Together. Which means when we come together, that's why you can't do it at the crib. You got to come and let's do this thing together. Grab your neighbor and say, listen, I can't, by myself this looks big. By myself I can't get healed. By myself I can't get my deliverance. But when me and you work together, I stopped telling God about my big problems. When I start telling my problems about my big God. How great is our God? Can I get a witness here? Whatever and however things appear to you, it's not as big as your God is. Look at your neighbor and say, whatever you're dealing with, it ain't big as God. Yeah, your debt looks big, but it ain't big as God. Because he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Yes, I get depressed and I get distressed, but ain't big as God. Because he was wounded for my transgressions, bruised for my iniquities. Chastisement of my peace was upon him. And I come to find out that he was a man of sorrows and acquainted with my grief. Come on, talk to me here. I don't have to worry about sickness because cancer can look big. Diabetes, high blood pressure can look big. Heart disease and heart trouble looks big. Hallelujah. But by his stripes. I wish I had a shouting crew. Y'all left your shout in the car. Come on, put your coat on, go back and get it, and come on back in with it. I said, by his stripes, I can be healed. Is there anybody here that knows that I don't talk about the facts, I talk about my faith? Yeah, the facts say I might be broken in the 10 Commandments. But my faith says my God is going to supply my every need according to his riches and glory by Christ. Come on, talk back to me in this house. My facts say that I'm all by myself, but my faith says he walks with me. He talks with me. Hey, he tells me that I'm his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. Facts may say racism, sexism, and militarism might be at an all-time high. Bullying might be the order of the day. But my faith looks up to thee. Thou Lamb of Calvary, Savior divine, now hear me when I pray. Take all my guilt away. Ooh, let me from this day be wholly thine. Somebody know fear makes things look bigger. That's why it says it was shut up, because they were afraid. They were sitting on the outside hoping some kind of way that the wall was going to fall by itself. They said we didn't come this far, and that wall is keeping me from my blessing. They forgot that the 10 spies who said we can't take it had gotten outvoted by God. They had forgotten that Joshua and Caleb had already come back and said that I didn't see giants, I saw grapes. You better magnify your blessing and stop remembering your problem. It's grapes on the other side of that wall. It's jobs on the other side of that wall. It's a miracle on the other side of that wall. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm not going to let this last wall keep me from where God's got for me. I wish somebody here know I'm not just going to sit here and fold up and throw in the towel just because I see one more wall. I told you there's always one more before God does his best. Is there anybody here that know God is ready to do a miracle? Grab your neighbor by the hand and say, God ain't cleared his throat yet. He's getting ready to speak. Well, before we get to the wall fall, you got to be willing to do the unbelievable. If you want to accomplish what seems impossible, can I get a witness here? What wall do you need to fall? Some addiction may need to fall. Some oppression may need to fall. Some Negro might need to fall. But whatever's in your way, you need to tell your neighbor he's getting ready to bring that sucker down. Can I get a witness here? God's got a strategy that's different than the enemy. The enemy's strategy is to make you scared. The enemy's strategy is to make you afraid. The enemy's strategy is to get you to believe that doctor report. The enemy's strategy is to get you to believe your bank account. The enemy's strategy is to get you to believe what that Negro told you. The Negro's strategy is to get you to believe because you divorced, you can't be used of God. Because you don't have the right gender, the right orientation, that God can't use you. The enemy's strategy is to get you to get depressed and say, forget them, I'm going home. She looked at me cross-eyed. The usher didn't give me a program. The deacon didn't shake my hand. The pastor didn't call my name. The enemy's strategy is to get you to throw in the towel. But you need to say, before I quit, I'm going to do more. Before I sit down, I'm going to step up. The children of Israel, I feel God in this house. The children of Israel decided to say, Joshua, I don't know what we're going to do. Joshua said, don't worry about it. I talked to God last night. I wish we had more Joshuas, who had more pastors, who had more leaders. Instead of talking and going to the White House, getting a photo op with the man building the wall, you need to get down on your knees and get a word from the Lord. And if you go to the White House, go tell them this wall is about to fall. Can I get a witness? Is there anybody here who's got a word because you are willing to listen to the prophet? That's what's wrong with about 20 of y'all. You want a word from God, but don't want to listen to no preacher. You want a word from God, but don't want to hear your pastor. You want to question everything the pulpit says, but believe everything the news says, everything Twitter says. You want to go on Facebook, want to put your doggone face in the book and find out what the Lord said. Can I get a witness here? But somebody in here got enough faith to say, I'm about to get up on my feet because the preacher said, rise up. Rise up. We about to march. Rise up. We about to move. Rise up. We about to go forward. Somebody help somebody up and say it's marching time. Can I get a witness here? It's time to march. Joshua said, I tell you, we ain't got as many as they got. You know, our army is smaller than theirs. But God told me, if you follow my directions, we're going to bring this wall down. The walls that divide our city, the walls that divide downtown from around town, the walls that keep the government from giving you money in your school district, the wall that keeps you from getting the loan that everybody else gets, the wall that keeps you from getting equity when you know you deserve it. Somebody say, I'm tired of being sick and tired. Canaan is what I'm after. I'm on my way. Because Canaan land, I'm about to cross. Somebody say it's time to listen to the preacher. The preacher said, rise. Are you up on your feet? Well, he said next week, tell you what you do. We ain't going to do no CPL training. We're not going to do no crossbow training. All I need you to do is to get your little tired feet and get up off your rip-to-ditty. Stop sitting on your blessed assurance, because he says it's time to do something for God. Somebody said you are holding up the marching time because you ain't got up yet. Look at your lazy neighbor and say, we can't march till you move. Tell them we can't go nowhere. They say, I can't get up. Tell them, how did you get in here? Did they roll you in? Did they scoot you in? Then get up on your feet. It's marching time. I told you the reason why some folk can't get delivered. They come to church to be entertained when it's marching time. They come to church for somebody to make them feel good when it's marching time. But I didn't come in the snow to entertain you. I didn't come in the cold to give you no warm fuzzy. Get your butt up. It's marching time. 2019. God brought us 40 years. It's time to cross over. We got blessings coming. Somebody say, I'm ready. If I don't get to go, well, the preacher told us, here's what we're going to do. Not ball up your knuckles. Not pull off your grease. Not take out your earrings. Not scratch up a face. But I just want you to walk around the wall. Somebody take a walk around the wall. Can I get a witness here? Well, y'all stop. Because that's the problem right now. Sometimes you're doing too much. That's what was wrong with them. He just told them to walk, not talk. Some of y'all talking and you ain't walking. Can I get a witness here? Tell your neighbor you talk too much. We're talking when we should be walking. Stop talking on the premises and start standing on the promises and walk. The miracle was not in just the walk. The miracle was when he told him, don't say nothing. Keep your mouth shut. Just walk. Don't say hallelujah. Don't say thank you, Jesus. On Monday, just walk. The enemy gets confused when you don't say nothing, when you should be cussing. Stop talking and start walking. I'm on Wednesday now. Are you still walking? On Thursday, one time around. On Friday, one time around. I'm up to Saturday. Some of y'all still on Monday. Can you at least take one walk around this wall? Can I get a witness here? And he told him, don't shout until I tell you. So the last thing, and I'm out of here. Tell your neighbor, by the time I walk Monday through Saturday, I done walked off my stress. I done walked off my pain. I done walked off my frustration. I done walked up some courage. I done walked up some dignity. When I shut my mouth, I can hear the Lord talking. When I shut my mouth, I can hear my pastor preaching. When I shut my mouth, I can hear my mama and my big mama telling me it's gonna be all right. When I shut my mouth, I can remember the promises that the Lord gave me, that the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my light. When I shut my mouth, I can remember his word that said, fret not thyself because of evildoers. No, be envious of their evil deeds. Somebody remember your word. Somebody ready now. Tell your neighbor it's the seventh day. And on the seventh day, the Bible says, Joshua told them, this time walk 7 times. And every time you walk, this time shout. Don't wait till the wall falls. Shout now. Shout over your addiction. Shout over your oppression. Shout over your financial problem. Shout. Shout. Can I shout? Yeah. Is it all right if I shout? Yeah. Shout for your family. Shout for your city. Shout for your state. Shout for your government. Shout for yourself. Shout. And the wall got to fall. I heard Joshua said, the people shouted, sang their song, prayed their prayers. Jericho wall fell down flat. This wall gotta fall. Look at your neighbor and say, it's coming down. It's coming down. Say, it's on his way down. Know it. Say it. Say it. Tell your neighbor, the wall gotta fall. My shout is gonna bring it down. My praise is gonna bring it down. Because praise is what I do. Not cuss, not fuss, but praise is what I do. If praise can bring it down, it's gotta fall. If the wall is waiting on me to shout about my God, I don't bring it down. But praise is my weapon. My praise is my weapon. My shout. Because I'm encouraging the one who can bring it down. I can't make it fall. Sitting in my praise is my way of saying, sick 'em, God. When I tried everything I can, my praise is my way of saying, it's your turn, God. Y'all missing me. When I've tried everything I know to do, my seminary degree didn't work. Because it don't seemingly stop fire hoses and dogs. When I come to find out my education ain't enough, it don't stop angry, ignorant racists who never made it past 8th grade. I found out my money don't work. Because sometimes you can be full of money and still be in bondage. Because there's some things money can't buy. If your wall is a health problem, I'm afraid that there's some rich people who can't finance their way. If they could pay their way past the addictions that their children have, and they could pay their way through the Alzheimer's that mama has, if they could pay their way, don't you think they'd have done it by now? Only thing they didn't figure out is some of the walls they built to trap you is hurting their own kids. The walls they built to stop you, causing them not to have a job. Reason why people are fretting, it ain't people who normally know how to make it through time. Some folk always had to make it paycheck to paycheck. Some folk used to calling and telling them I ain't got it. Some people know what it is to borrow from this, loan to that. They make the people who fretting right now. Things don't get bad until people who used to having don't have no more. People used to getting access. And when people would turn on folk that look just like them, watch this, and even voted for them, then you understand that wall is not just a racial wall, it's a class wall. It's a gender wall. It's a wall that people who are working for other people get paid less than the people they're working for. The people who are working under them get paid more than the people who they lead. There are a lot of walls in our community. They got to fall. Pick one. There's a bunch of them. You ain't got to build no new ones. Our job is to bring down the old ones. But if you take the word of God, the text says, when you blow your trumpet, he says, don't shout till I tell you. That's what's wrong with some folk, can't follow instruction. I'm glad that they were unified. If you come through 40 years in the desert, you're going to do everything the pastor say. When you watch your ancestors die because they were disobedient, you're going to do everything leaders say. Don't wait till God has to show you what his hand can do before you straighten up and act right. Why is it that we only obey after we see God's hand? You ought to be like the people of Joshua. Obey him before the wall falls. Joshua said, walk. I told you it was only 6 acres. It wouldn't. You'd be walking around the city. I ain't walking around Detroit. I didn't ask you to do that. But if you got hell in your house, walk around your house. Walk around City Hall. Come on, talk to me. Walk around yourself. But it's a symbol of saying, I'm being obedient and I'm trusting God. Joshua said, when I tell you to shout, that's when you shout. This was not orchestrated praise. It was designed to make sure everybody was acting on one accord. Because when you just shout when you want to, the enemy don't get it. But when they wasn't watching you marching quiet for 6 days, and all of a sudden they hear one big loud noise, they'll start killing themselves. See, what God wants is unity among his people. He wants you to shut up together and walk together and then shout together. It's that simple. And if you can just obey the voice of God, this wall will fall. Give God praise in the house.